All right, guys, welcome back to the Bite Size Podcast. This is Lorayne Michaels, and today I have a lovely guest on. Her name is Karel. I met her online through the social media and loved her story, loved her platform, and I was super excited to have the opportunity to have her on. And so today we are talking to a beautiful coach. She's a mindfulness and self-love coach, and her name is Karel. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be
Absolutely.
here.
Thank you for being here. I'm glad we were able to make this work. So tell me, or tell the audience rather, your story. How you got into coaching, and what do you do as a mindfulness and self-love coach?
So as a mindfulness and self-love coach, I help women who are really struggling with shame and self-loathing, heal from that using authentic self-love, self-compassion, and inner child work. So very focused on the specific experience of really layers of shame. And this
Mm,
usually kind of is loaded in a lot of heartbreak, which we can get into a little bit later. But I
yeah.
think we have a kind of general understanding of heartbreak as like relationship based, which it very much is. But I think we can experience lots and lots of different kinds of heartbreak throughout our lives. And
Mm,
that really leads to internalized shame and a sense of self loathing, of self judgment, self criticism. So I really want to help women heal from that, using the power of their own hearts and their own minds.
mm,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
awesome.
Thank you. Yeah.
So I noticed with going onto your website that you have 10 years in the health industry, or medicine basically.
Mm.
Were you working at a hospital or private
Uh,
practice?
Yeah, private practice. I'm a licensed therapist. And so I've been practicing for 10 years. I've had private practice for 8 years. So the
Okay.
coaching is sort of an offshoot of that. The therapy practice was really where I cut my teeth, where I learned so much about the human experience, all the
Mm,
patterns we get into, we, um, the ways that we try to navigate life, and
yeah.
how that navigation sometimes leads us astray,
Mm,
especially the older we get and the more that we experience different circumstances. Sometimes the stuff that we learned early on to survive doesn't actually help anymore. Kind of
mm,
is it wears out, but because we didn't really have a different way of learning how to really thrive in life, that we get stuck in these survival patterns, and it's all trying to help us, right? Survival is
yeah.
trying to live, trying to get by, and that within the practice of being a therapist, sitting with hundreds of people, over the past 10 years, have really gotten a sense of what it's like um, to introduce someone to a different way of seeing themselves,
Mm,
and open to a part of themselves that has been in hiding for years, right? And
yeah.
then how do we help that part of them feel safe? And then how do we honor that part of them so that they can really fully come alive, come online,
Yeah.
and really feel like they're living a full life?
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So you stepped away from therapy and started a different approach. Is that correct?
Yeah, I started to see, and just being in the field for 10 years, I think the field is still very young, especially in
Mm.
comparison to other medical fields. I actually am of the opinion that it doesn't really belong in the medical field,
Mm.
but it is a young field and it's been changing a lot. And especially in the past 10 years, I've seen this transformation that didn't really sit well with me, because
Mm.
I think it's become so embedded in the medical model and the pharmaceutical model. But what we're talking about with therapy is our emotions and is our
Mm.
spirit. And that doesn't really, we can't. we can't really understand that from a hard science framework, in my
Mm.
opinion,
Yeah.
because it really is so much more intuitive, and there's so much more mysticism in it, that to try to fit it into a scientific framework where we're looking at cells, we're looking at like sort of the kind of electricity that runs through our body, it just didn't quite. It felt very limiting to me
Mm.
to
Yeah.
be working with people from this framework that really sees any sort of mental health struggle as illness or disease
Mm.
that needs to be treated.
Mm. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to me, treatment and healing are very different. They have very different feelings. They have a different energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so crazy. The parallels or similarities, I should say, because I have, 15 plus years in medicine as well. And I walked away
Mm,
from that, in 2020 after COVID,
mm.
for similar and different reasons. Just when I went into it was the reason why I went into it was to help the helpless, to help people,
Mm,
overcome and get through things that they don't know or understand or can get through themselves. Right. And then the
mm.
more and more I got into it and learned about it and medicine and how Western medicine is and treats patients, people, and the ailments, I was finding myself more and more out of alignment. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I see and agree with a lot of what you're saying. Um, so with therapy and with your approach, how might therapy actually be holding you back from happiness?
Yeah. So because the therapy industry now is so influenced by capitalism, right? And so the three areas that I see that I've seen this happening is it is really folded into the medical model. And so health insurance is now involved.
Mm,
And private health insurance is a for-profit industry. And then we have pharmaceuticals that have gotten involved. So now there's a pill you can take for basically any mental health condition that you might be diagnosed with. And pharmaceuticals are also for profit. And then we have the digital therapy industry, like BetterHelp, Talkspace, and there's a whole bunch more springing up. And
mm,
they are really looking to capitalize on the need for mental health. So we saw an uptick in social media awareness for mental health before COVID, but especially during COVID. And
mm,
those were when basically these tech companies saw an in. They said, how can we commodify this?
mm,
And so these platforms are also for profit. And
mm,
so, because there are these three sort of monoliths of capitalism that have started to really influence the industry, the message of healing is lost and it becomes
mm.
treatment. It becomes you need this. It becomes you need this medication for life. Um, and there's really the humanness has been taken out of it,
Yep.
right? So when
Yep.
health insurance is involved in therapy, there's a third party who is dictating what sort of care you can get. And that third party person never meets you. There's
Yeah.
someone in an office somewhere running claims,
Yeah.
right? And so as a practitioner, I my hands are tied, right? And as a client or as a patient, you don't actually get to advocate for yourself with the people who are making decisions about who's paying for these services.
Yeah.
And this becomes very normalized. And so then the value of the therapeutic connection and the value of therapy on a monetary level also gets lost
Yeah.
because we're not really shown the full capacity of what therapy can do. Um, because it's so commodified, because it changes so many hands before you can actually get to the meat of it.
Yep.
And because also I think marketing is just so hard. It's so hard to to really communicate a lot of the nuance, a lot of the complexity of what it means to really get in there and help somebody connect with their younger selves or connect with their hurt parts, to really move toward transformation. Right?
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
like clever way that you can wrap that up in a bow for marketing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, huh? So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more. You've mentioned it a couple times with the um, healing from old wounds as a child. Tell
Mm,
me a little bit more about the inner child work that you do.
yeah. So the best way that I can explain it is that we have every single younger part in us, alive in us every day. And so just because we are of a certain age chronologically, doesn't mean that all of the younger iterations of us are gone. They
Mm,
live within us. They live in our cells. They live in our memories. They live in our bodies. And when there is a wound, right, whether this is a single traumatic event or just kind of longstanding conditioning that didn't quite work, right? So this is often like some sort of neglect or some sort of like unhelpful messaging that we received, or even
mm,
just hardship, right? Hardship that we experienced with our entire families. Anything that was difficult for us, if it's not resolved or if it's not held with compassion, then it lives in us as a wound.
mm,
And these wounds often present themselves as um, inappropriate behavior, I should
mm-hmm.
say. Like
Yeah.
um, when we as adults act like children, it's deemed inappropriate. We act out, we make bad decisions, right? We don't do what's best for us. And
Yeah.
this is very often a sign of an inner child wound. So the inner child work is starting to recognize these things as wounds rather than as flaws or as marks on our character or something wrong with me. It's rather this is something that is coming from a deep place of hurt that keeps asking for love, that
Mm,
keeps asking for kind attention.
mm,
So we recognize that, and then we start to give it that love and kind attention that it's been missing. And depending on how old we are and when that wound started, we're talking 20 years maybe that this wound has been ignored or
yeah.
has been continually reopened even.
Right.
So this loving attention needs to be very gentle, but also very persistent.
Mm,
And so I talk a lot about persistent self love, right? So just keep showing up, just keep showing up, just keep showing up. Because what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to really start to offset the continual wounding that had happened over the past however many years.
mm,
And so you're going to have to really keep coming at it so that you're chipping away at that pain one bit at a time.
yeah.
And when you do that, and when you're able to do that for yourself, right, that also really creates this sense of self-reliance and trust in yourself,
Okay.
um, because you're never going to abandon yourself. You're always with you,
Right.
and you
Right.
have ultimate control over whether or not you show up for yourself.
Right.
Whereas, we have friends, we have family, we have partners who ideally will show up for us, but sometimes they can't. Sometimes they don't.
Mm,
And to give ourselves over to them completely leaves us in a place of powerlessness.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so this is why the self-love piece is so important.
Mm. Wow. Are you familiar with, or have you heard any of Ed Milet's podcasts? I don't know
No.
if you listen to him, but just recently he had on Dr. Caroline Leaf, and
Mm,
she deals a lot about with the brain and neuroplasticity and
mm,
trauma, and she just came out with a book for children and well, for parents for children, about the healing the inner child and the wounds and the
mm,
mental everything, all of this, what you're talking about. And I loved that you mentioned it because she said it too about every memory and every event, everything that happens to you is a memory that lives. And
Yeah.
she was using the two examples she had was like a figurine of a tree, a
Mm.
healthy tree, and a dead, dying, sick looking tree. And she
Mhm.
was saying about how the traumatic event and the traumatic memory lives as this dead thing.
Mm.
And it was so fascinating how she was talking about how you have to heal through it and bring up the memories and the events and the techniques that she was talking about doing. Eventually that old dying decay tree starts, she says, you start to fertilize it, you start to feed it, and it'll turn
Mhm.
into, something healthy and green and growing and a
Right.
good memory, or you heal through it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so fascinating to me. I absolutely love the brain and how it works and everything. I think
Yeah.
the medical side of me in my past, that kind of, I nerd out on that. So I absolutely love that. Another thing that you had said about with working with the inner child trauma, um, and how a lot of times as adults, we don't realize it and we act out and we're inappropriate, or whatever, however it may show up as an adult, but really it
Mhm.
is from that child wound that was never healed. Another podcast that I was listening to was with Lewis House, and he said the same thing because he had
Mhm.
gone through years and years of therapy. And he said, it wasn't until I addressed the 5-year-old Lewis and I really was working with that Lewis and how I was showing up and loving the 5-year-old and,
Yeah.
making him feel safe so that I can feel safe as an adult, and how
Mhm.
it really is true when you work with and deal with that inner childhood trauma that was neglected and never dealt with and just shoved down, and now you're an adult. When you heal that and you work through that, you show up how you're supposed to be. You show up
Mhm.
in a whole different way. Um, and I think it's something that is not talked about, and it's not, um, I don't want to say taught, but like you were saying, with Western medicine and therapy, that's it, they don't deal with that. They just mask
Mhm.
it and give you a medicine to take and tell you you're sick,
Mhm.
instead of working through it and getting to the root of it, which I feel like is such a disservice to people, um, because we're seeing so much more of it now.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that it is so fascinating, and it's so good that you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think, and there's something that came to mind as you were talking. I also have heard that anecdote by Lewis Howes. I think he's awesome.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that I think maybe also this is a symptom of a very agnostic or atheist culture,
Mm,
because the idea of inner child work is incredibly spiritual. We
mm,
can't we can't document it, we can't diagram it, right? We can't like go through an MRI and find our inner child. And
yeah.
so there really needs to be a sense of faith in something beyond what we can put our finger on or what we can see. It's
Yeah.
much more of a kind of you go back into a felt experience, you go into consciousness,
Mm,
right? And that I think because our society has just been so fragmented when it comes to spirituality and religion, that there's a fear associated with inner child work. I've
mm,
encountered this in therapy with clients who just aren't interested in it, right? And so, if you're not interested in it, I'm not going to make you do it.
right.
But then I think that there's an impasse there because it's something that I so believe in. It's something that I have done my own inner child healing and seen incredible transformation, you
Mm,
know, and I just know, someone sitting in front of me, they're suffering. I just know that their inner child is screaming. But if they
mm,
can't see it, right, because they're so interested in proof, right, and that there's no relationship they've been given with faith,
yeah.
then then me trying to take them there is really a disservice to them,
Yeah.
right? And so it was this heartbreaking moment where I was like, I can't help everyone, but I can help the people who already have a sense of this faith, who have a connection to something greater,
Mm.
who are ready and willing
Yeah.
to acknowledge inner children,
Yeah.
and who get excited by that concept, right?
Yeah.
Then I can certainly help them.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's where the impact is going to have to be.
Can you share more about that concept of authentic self-love and how it differs from the coping mechanisms taught in traditional therapy, and
Yeah.
how embracing that, how that contributed to your transformation?
Yeah. So authentic self-love is, it needs to be felt, right? I
Mm.
think that there's a lot of self-love can be seen as like platitudes, especially now on social media, and just how everything becomes so there's the heart kind of gets drained out of it.
Mm.
And so in therapy, a lot of coping mechanisms, they are meant to be good for you, right? So we do things because they're good for us, but is it because we truly love ourselves? I don't know. We don't have to love ourselves to do what's good for us, right? Because we just know I'm supposed to eat vegetables, so I will, right? But if you don't love vegetables, then you're just eating vegetables and you're like suffering through it. So authentic self love is really connecting with a desire for yourself to feel good, to feel safe, and to feel cherished. And we all have this part in us that wants to feel this way. And it's because of that unmet desire, unmet need, that we have pain, that we have suffering, right? So recognize there's a part of me that wants to feel loved and safe and cherished. And wow, I so want to meet that need. I care so much about that part of me, right? And because of that, then I want to do what's best for me because I care, not because it's the right thing to do. It happens to be the right thing to do, but that's not the motivation. And that's where the authenticity comes in, is you're truly connecting with the feeling of love. And that feeling of love is directed at these really tender parts of us, especially the parts of us that feel the most wretched, the parts of us that are hurting, or the parts of us that we have felt ashamed of in the past.
I love that. That is so, man, I can only imagine like the work that you do. Like, I can only imagine what your clients say and how they feel like, oh my gosh, everybody needs this.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
man.
And
So go ahead.
I was just going to share a little bit about my own experience with it.
Yeah, do.
Because I had been in therapy and a therapist for so long, I was very familiar with like doing what's best for you in terms of like, this is good for me, all the self care things. And, but still, like at the end of the day, just really, and I can't even say I hated myself, because I think there's an active element to that that I wasn't even aware of. Like I just
Mm.
offline, and I was treating myself, my body terribly. So I had these terrible eating habits, just very fluctuant, right? I would eat healthy, but then I would binge on unhealthy foods. And
Mm.
I was smoking cigarettes. I'd been smoking since I was 19 years old and hid it from the world. So shame smoking, kind of in the back of my apartment building, right? Like these things that just like, they're not good for you, but also like wasn't really honoring my body or my heart in any sort of way. It
Mm.
was this kind of self abuse that it just kind of became this autopilot thing. Like, this is just what I do. Like, I put on this face of being very put together. I know what's good for you. I know what's good for me. I was also running and working out and, setting good boundaries, like all these things. And at
Yeah.
the end of the day, just like really ruining my body.
Mm.
And got to a point where it all caught up with me, right? I wasn't having good relationships. I was always just embroiled in self-doubt, and continually trying to improve, right? And so I'm learning these good relationship skills. I'm learning how to honor certain parts of what I need in relationship, but also outsourcing the love that I needed. And so putting that on friends, putting that on partners,
Mm.
and really got to a point where these relationships would crumble.
Mm.
And I would just be stuck in this place of, well, what's the point? Right? Because I didn't have that love for myself.
Yeah.
And there was no motivation to really push through, to thrive.
Yeah.
And it was really those moments of, how could I still feel this way? Like, I'm a therapist, I've been in therapy, I should be better at this. How could I still feel this way? And that's when I really discovered this practice of what it means to authentically love myself,
Mm.
what it
Yeah.
meant to look at all the parts of myself that I really and honestly acknowledge how shameful I still felt, and to
Yeah.
say, okay, this is where I'm going to start. And I think that radical honesty was what allowed me to start to cultivate that love.
Yeah. Yeah. So what were some strategies or practices that made it effective in overcoming those challenges that you were going through? Because a lot of what you're talking about, a lot of people are going through. I mean, I've been
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of that, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
what were the strategies and practices that you started implementing?
Yeah, the number one practice that I used was a meditation called RAIN. And it's an acronym for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture.
Ooh,
And what it
write
does
that
is it
down.
walks. I'll say it again: recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture.
Okay.
And this walks you through a process of mindfulness and compassion
Mm.
for something that hurts, right? So the recognize is what hurts, and it could be many things. So you pick one thing, what hurts, and then you really open to acknowledging, right, and finding a deep ouch, right. So there is this kind of honesty that you need to get to,
Yeah.
and so I had to get to a point where I had to admit that smoking cigarettes was an emotional thing for me, right? That I had always been like, oh yeah, I can quit anytime. It's just a habit, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
had to really humble myself and say, you know what, this is what I'm doing to treat a very, very, very deep wound. And I
Mhm.
have to find it. I have to find it. And in finding it, opening to it, then being able to stay with that wound long enough to say, what do you really need? Right. So that
Mm.
hurt part of me. So I was 19 when I started smoking. That hurt part of me, he's 19 years old, just a baby, and I asked her, what do you really need? What
Mm.
can I give you so that you don't choose this anymore? And the answer that came to me was, I need you to care about me. I need you to
Wow.
care about me so much that you don't let me do this.
Mm.
And so it was this moment of like, holy crap, I have abandoned this part of me for half my life, right? Because what she needed was to be cared for, and I just let her do whatever she was going to do. And
Mm.
I didn't intervene, and I didn't show her a better way. I didn't nurture her. So getting to this point where and saying, okay, yes, yes, I'm here. I care so much about you. I'm so sorry it took this long,
Mm.
and I'm never leaving you again. You know, and
Yeah.
this care that I have, like, it's always here because I'm always here.
Yeah.
Like, I'll
Yeah.
never leave you. And just hearing that, right? Like, when we've been abandoned, um, and when we finally hear from a trustworthy source, right? I'll never leave you.
Yeah.
It's incredibly healing,
Yeah.
and it kind of moves us closer into this intimacy with that energy.
Mm. Yeah.
And that energy, when it comes from us, it moves us toward integration, it moves us toward wholeness.
Yeah. That is so beautiful. So I know, like, healing and the transformation, that it's such a huge, complex ball, and it's a pretty complex process to unravel. Um, were there any setbacks or moments of doubt in your journey that you had to navigate, and how did you overcome them?
Mm, yeah, definitely. Lots of doubt. And I think it's very normal to have
Yeah,
doubt because we get to a point where we need this amount of healing. It's because we have been abandoned,
yeah,
right? And so part of us is so wired to protect ourselves from abandonment by saying, you're not actually going to stick around, so I'm not going to trust you, right? So
yeah,
for me, there was a lot of like, is this really going to work? Like, I don't really think that I'm going to show up for myself. Like I think I'm just
yeah,
going to let myself down again. And that was frustrating because then I was like, then what else am I supposed to do? Right? Like
yeah,
I've done everything else.
yeah.
Um and there was a real moment where I I thought, okay, well, and I was 38 at the time that I was doing this, right? If my 38-year-old self can't show up for me, what about my 50-year-old self? Like she's got 12 more years of this, right? And I'm only going in this direction, right? And so she must know. She must have more to give than I do, right? And so I started to just imagine her and really beckon her.
Mm,
And as soon as I opened to that, right, said, "Hey, can you help me?" She's instantly there, right?
mm,
And I would say at this point, the awareness that I have is that she's always there. It's whether or not I'm paying attention to her,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right? And so my 50-year-old self, my future self, higher self, she shows up and she's complete, calm, warm, compassionate energy, right?
mm,
She's just this very healed presence and
mm,
so incredibly giving. And what she said to me was, "You can do this. I'm always here. You can lean on me." Right.
mm,
And there are these moments where I would really feel her, sitting right next to me, holding me. And this,
mm,
for me particularly, was a very foreign experience to be held by a woman in a way that felt safe,
mm,
especially a woman who kind of was able to envelop me. Um, my actual mother is quite small, and so probably as soon as I was 13, I was bigger than her.
mm,
And so there was just this craving my body had for just being wrapped up
mm,
in a maternal energy. And
mm.
I finally got that. And I
Yeah,
finally trusted that. Um, and so there's always something greater we can call upon. And when we do that, I think it's important that it's something that is more ethereal, something that is, an energy, a divine energy, or an
mm,
archetype, right? Something that we can always access.
mm,
That we can certainly rely on other people, like physical human beings,
yeah,
but that when we're in that place of true desperate need, um, I think it's really important that we have an energetic being to call upon
yeah.
because they're always there.
Yeah. I mean, as you were describing it, how I related was my relationship with Jesus.
Hmm. Hmm.
How Jesus shows up for
Yep.
me, and the love and that cohesiveness and relationship, um and the healing, and just meets me where I'm at and gives me exactly what I need when I need it. But
Hmm.
I have to be there, and I have
Right.
to ask for it.
Right.
He's a gentleman. It's not He's not going to shove himself on me. I
Yeah.
have to ask for it. I have to, reach up, and,
Hmm.
I need this.
Hmm.
I very much related those two. Um, that was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell me some practical steps that my listeners can do or use in navigating this journey, what this looks like to cultivate mindfulness and self-love and authentic self-love.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So practical tips. Number one might be like, Whenever it is that you're feeling like off or agitated or, just like not great, to pause, right? I think we tend to try to grasp at something or speed up actually to get through it.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, pause. And you might cue yourself by putting your hand on your heart. Or if that doesn't really resonate, you could put your hand on your belly, just somewhere where like you're connecting with yourself physically.
Mm-hmm.
And it could be as simple as reminding yourself, "Oh, I'm here. I'm here." Right? And it's a reassurance. It's a reminder. It's a way of bringing yourself to the present. If you feel able to go a little bit deeper, you might say, "What do I need right now?
Mm.
What do I need right now that I don't think I'm allowed to need?"
Oh, I like that.
Mm.
Yeah, giving
Because it,
yourself that freedom that
Mhm.
yeah, I like
And
that.
it gets a little bit deeper than like sort of our kind of usual consciousness. Once you have asked yourself that question and allow an answer to come up, you might find a way to give yourself that,
Mm.
right? And it could be, it's usually a message, right? I need to feel like I need to rest. Maybe that's it. I need to rest. And so you could say, it's okay to rest, right? And maybe find a time if you're in the middle of something like, oh, when I'm done with this task, I'm going to rest for 5 minutes, right? So that in itself is actually a self-love, but also a mindfulness practice because you're
Mm.
paying attention to what's happening in the moment and you're
Okay.
responding in the moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good. Those were very practical.
Good.
Sometimes it can be hard, with,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, we are trying to rush to the next thing. I feel like we live in such a microwave society. We want everything now, fast,
Mm-hmm.
yesterday.
Yeah.
So I think it could be challenging for people, especially high achieving people, or people that, have not dealt with the trauma, the pain of the past, for them to slow down, because slowing down would actually mean to feel the feelings,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think that's so beautiful, to honor yourself and to ask yourself, what is it? What do I need? And to
Mm-hmm.
take it that step further of, what am I needing that I'm not giving myself permission to need?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Man, because that takes it to a whole nother level of
Yeah.
connecting, the mind, body, heart, all of that to go within.
Yeah. Yeah. It deepens the consciousness. Right.
Yeah.
So, there's a line of consciousness right there. So everything that we're aware of, kind of that would just we kind of take in is above the line. And then everything that's underneath the surface that, kind of informs some of our inappropriate behavior,
Yeah.
that's below the line. And asking yourself these questions, it it helps to dip the line, right?
Mm,
So more and more becomes above the line of consciousness. And
mm,
once you're conscious of it, then you can do something about it. And you can be in control of that, right? So
yeah.
even just this practical tip, right? There are several steps. If you feel comfortable asking yourself, what do you need, then do it.
Yeah.
If you feel comfortable asking yourself that second question, then do it. But if you don't, just start with the simple ones. And that's an
Yeah.
introduction into it. And that's what helps a self-love process become more approachable, is it doesn't have to be deep and you don't have to cry every time.
Mm,
You can get there, but you don't have to start there. You
yeah.
start where you feel comfortable.
Yeah. That's awesome. So where can anyone find you who listens to this and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this woman's amazing. I need to work with her." Where can we
Love
find
to work
you?
with you. Yeah. You can find me at my website. It's anchoredawakening.com. And I
Okay.
have several coaching programs that are all centered around self love. Or you can find me on Instagram. It's at Anchored Awakening, where I
Okay.
share information about self love and also about mental health.
Awesome. We will
Yeah.
make sure to put all of that in the show notes so people
Awesome.
can find you. Man, Thank you so much. I could probably go on for a lot longer, but there would probably be more for me because I find this so intriguing.
Good. I'm so glad. Yeah, this was
That's
so much fun.
awesome. Yes, it was. Thank you so, so much. Again, it was an honor and a privilege to have you. And we will put all the information in the show notes. And I look forward to connecting with you more. And we'll see if we can do another one sometime.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Lorraine.
Awesome. Thank you.